Good morning, everybody. Thanks to the Federation to give me this opportunity to chat with you on dreams that I share with you. CPP expansion being one of those. I have two other dreams that I will mention later on during my presentation. These dreams are very important because they all rest on principles of respect, dignity, and fairness, things that should not have to be explained. Looks like some governments or employers need to be recalled that these principles should be respected, so we'll continue working on that. Before discussing the rationale for a CPP expansion, let me just go quickly to some history on how the CPP was introduced. It's in '66, and the reason that was mentioned then, I don't think the word poverty was mentioned, but it was to serve as a floor protection plan over which the private enterprises would build, meaning that there was then and still is today only about 1/3 of employers sponsoring a pension plan for their employees. So the intent was for the CPP to be a spark to the employers not sponsoring a plan to sponsor one. In those days, the only plan that was social plan existing to alleviate poverty was the old age security. And as soon as 1967, just 1 year after the introduction of the CPP, government had planned that before ahead of time. It was not a coincidence. The GIS was introduced, which was meant to alleviate poverty for those who could not be yet covered by the CPP. So it was then projected that with the expansion of private pension plans, the poverty rate in Canada would be reduced. Some of it happened just because of the CPP from 1973 to 2010, when the CPP kind of matured. The percentage of people relying on the guaranteed income supplement went down from 56% to 35%. And as I had always projected, this will not go lower, because without any expansion of the CPP or private pension plans, there will be 35% of Canadian seniors having to rely on the GIS, meaning people who earn just between, in total, including the OAS and the CPP and the GIS, no more than $20,000 a year. And $20,000, I don't have to explain that, even is as per some Statistics Canada definition, that's the break-even point of poverty. It is not. 20,000 is living in poverty. Maybe at 30,000 it starts to make sense, but not at 20,000. And when it was expected in 1966 that with the advent of the CPP, that there would be an expansion of private sector pension plans, I can't believe the government did know at the time that this would not happen. Because if you don't force people to save, they won't save. And Petula Clark had already done a song in those days saying, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. So that will never happen. If you don't force people to save, they won't save. That's one of the reasons for expanding the CPP. The main one being the alleviation of poverty. Alleviation of poverty for seniors. So we'll have to talk about poverty among active or people under retirement age. I'll come back to that later on. Another reason for expanding the CPP, that's a new one. That's very rare. It's the first time in my professional career that I'm outraged. But you probably know that a few years ago, New Brunswick brought in Canada what I call the Dutch pension virus. They just adopted that European solution to a Canadian problem that is not the same as it is in Europe. And even in Europe, the Dutch system is not a good solution. It looks to me, I hate to exaggerate like that, I hope I'm exaggerating, that it looks like an international conspiracy to take money out of the pensioners and the active members of pension plans. The New Brunswick new pension plan, they call it shared risk plan. It's not a shared risk plan, it's a dumped risk plan. The employer, the government has no risk at all. I'm not saying it's bad that the government wouldn't have risk, but don't call it a shared risk plan. I'll come back to that on too. So also on this matter. So this is really outrageous and even immoral, because the government of New Brunswick, they make laws, so they are allowing pension plans to take money out of the pensioners' fund and even out of the active members' fund. It's as if we would allow the banks and the insurance companies, when they have some financial difficulties, to say, well, sorry, I have to reduce your bank account this month because our years has not been too well. So this might look at an exaggeration, but it's not. It's not. Pensions are deferred salary. So once the promise has been made there, you can't get out of that promise. Governments can by introducing law. So it becomes with those laws legally acceptable, but it's immoral, and we should fight against that as much as we can. You know, the principles of dignity, respect, and fairness, without the proper application of these principles, the economy cannot go as well. So those who take decisions mainly mention the economy, but the more you respect these three principles, the better the economy will go. And they are far from being enough respected in those days, and it's going in the wrong direction with what the, excuse me, the New Brunswick province has done. At the federal level, the government, maybe you're aware of that, has introduced last year legislation allowing federally registered employers to do the same as in New Brunswick. Partly, fortunately, this legislation has been put on the back burner, but it's still in the air. So we're trying to fight that as much as possible. By the way, as an employee of the Professional Institute of Professional Employees in Ottawa, we have members in the public service of New Brunswick, so I had a chance to prepare briefing notes and proposals to PIPS, which they well taken. PIPS is the only union in New Brunswick who did not sign the MOU for this shared risk plan. And we were promised by the then Liberal chief, before he was elected, that he would listen to us if he would be elected. So he has listened to us. We have brought to his attention something very important, telling him, we're not here to ask you something. We're telling you that you have accepted very ill advice from your actuaries. They are telling you to change the investment policy, which will make your cost higher and will not change your risk at all. The risk that was supposed to be solved with this policy is that there would be less fluctuations in earnings, in investment earnings. It's true. If you invest less in equities, you will have less fluctuations. But for a big plan sponsored by a government, which might likely never go bankrupt, fluctuation is not a risk, it's just a reality. And the more risk you take, I'm talking of good risk here, not you have to be prudent, the higher return and the lower your cost. So the government has heard from us that with this new investment policy, you, the employer, are paying 50% too much to the pension plan, as you should. So I hope the Prime Minister is shaken enough to eventually change his mind, and if he does not, PIPS will go farther with this. Another reason to keep working on the CPP expansion is that, as you all well know, the Ontario province was fed up of the government, federal government, changing its mind after the 2010 agreement between provinces for a modest expansion of the CPP. The reason the federal government changed its mind, it's because it wanted to give some weight to the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, which claim that the small businesses don't have the mean for a CPP expansion. In a sense, they're right. With the hourly salary rate of only $10, not only don't you have mean to save, you don't even have mean to live decently. $10 an hour, as you know, it's about $20,000 a year. You cannot live on that. You're already in poverty, so they're right. So the point for the CFIB is not to complain that public sector's employees have too generous plans or that they can contribute to CPP. They should fight like you are so well, congratulations for that, on having a minimum salary wage of at least $15 an hour. So in my conclusions, I will get to some other interesting thoughts on those principles of equity and fairness. Some of the next points, sorry, I forgot to turn the... okay. So the next two slides, these are technical points which you must have heard before, so I will go maybe a little quickly with these. CPP is the only fully portable pension plan in Canada. It provides pensions that are guaranteed for life, they are indexed, and they protect essentially all Canadian workers. When you hear that CPP covers 92% of workers, that's not true. It covers 99-point-something% of workers, and 92 is because it takes into account that some people are at all times not working. So the unemployment rate being about 8%, that's where the 92% figure comes from. CPP protects accrued benefits, which the New Brunswick plan no longer does. In the private pension plan, when an employer sponsoring a pension plan goes bankrupt, very often the accrued benefits cannot be protected because if at the time of the bankruptcy the plan is in a deficit position, there's not enough money in the plan to protect those accrued benefits. With the CPP, it does not happen. When a single employer goes bankrupt, all CPP benefits already accrued, they are not lost, they're still there. The problem for the employees is that they stop as long as they will not find a new job accruing benefits under the CPP. But there are some dropout provisions in the CPP which are such that with some years of lower earnings are ignored, disregarded in the calculation of the pension at age 65. What the CPP has, it's not the only plan that has that, but it's the best plan in terms of covering or alleviating the risk of the pooling of investment and longevity. If the CPP were expanded by law, has been put in the CPP Act and also in the QPP Act, it would, but the funding, the financing of the expansion would have to be on a full cost basis. If the CPP had been put on a full cost basis in 1966, unfortunately it was not. I consider this was a big error. Rather than paying 9.9 today, we would be still paying just 5.56%. Too bad we have to put that much in the CPP, but an expansion, if you were to expand the CPP, double it from a 25% benefit to 50%, it would not cost 19%, it would cost an extra 5.5%, not 9.9%. The CPP is a real share risk plan. Both employees, employers pay 50%. There's no matter or principle or concept of surplus of deficit in the CPP. The costs have been established on a realistic basis and so well established, I take merit for that, that it's been reformed 15 years ago and they never had to change the cost, increase it or decrease it. Because when they look at the cost, they don't look at the next 5 years. They don't panic like New Brunswick did in 2010, changing the whole pension world just because of the big 2008 financial crisis. The 2008 financial crisis was just a bigger fluctuation than before, but things have since then, by themselves on the international market just adjust by themselves. So the third dreams of which I wanted to talk about, I mention it while I think about it, otherwise I will forget it, is that as long as the CPP will not be expanded, we will have 1/3 of employees in Canada covered by a pension plan. Those pension plans are very badly financed. And I'm disappointed that the actuaries are not doing a better job in that sense. There are reasons for that, but I don't excuse the reasons. I have proposed a very simple financing policy to the New Brunswick government. Hopefully, they will accept it. It's very simple. No contribution holidays. When there's a surplus, you don't take it. When there's a deficit, you amortize it. But there's not even a need to amortize the surplus because you're asking an employer to put money in the plan when the financial situations are at worst. Just wait, and situation will make up by themselves. So these are some more points. So technical points that I might already have covered. I will just let you read them. They are very technical. It might be long to explain them. If you have questions, try to reach me. If you don't have my coordinates, someone here can give them to you. I never decline any to answer any request that I have. So there are opposition to a CPP expansion, but I think I have an answer to all of them. The first one, I already covered that. Definitely those who either don't have a job or earn just $10 an hour, they don't have means to save. So this could be done by increasing to $15 the hourly salary rate. Of course, for a small employer having to pay more money in the CPP, the doubling of the CPP would cost employer just about 1.5% of salary and 1.5% to the employee. So because all costs are ultimately borne by employees, it's 3%. So there are some sacrifices to do to alleviate poverty. So what that 3% means is 2 years without salary increase. So that's a way of looking at it. It's not very positive, but I don't have more to say about that. Some say that CPP pension normal commences just at age 65. Most pension plan in the private sector is age 60. We have to accept that we are living longer than before, and that accruals should now be at age 65, pensionable age rather than 60. The problem of the CPP fund would be too big. Yes and no, it would be big. It's better to fragment it, but big or small, any big funds today, when they have a problem, all funds have problems. So the fragmentation would not necessarily resolve that.